promises to God, but loves his money more, that he doesn't follow through then with those promises, maybe dealing with finances and wealth. But remember, the perspective of Ecclesiastes is from a life where God doesn't matter. Not necessarily a life of someone who doesn't believe in God, but someone who would probably confess or acknowledge God to some degree, but makes decisions in life not based on God. Therefore, God doesn't matter. He doesn't take God into account in the way that he lives his life and the choices that they make. 2 Wednesday nights ago, I was not here, but I was told that Ken spoke on Ecclesiastes 5. I purposefully have not listened to his lesson yet, although I will, but I didn't want to. So any redundancy found in the lessons because we're reading the same book, not because I copied his lesson or he copied mine. Although it would be me copying his because his was already prepared before mine was. So Solomon has observed various kinds of men in the book of Ecclesiastes. He's observed the wise, the foolish, the wealthy, the poor, the powerful, the oppressed, the lazy, the hard worker, and now he speaks of the worshiper and the one who loves money. And he has some words of warning for both. Words that I think would be good for us to heed and to listen to and apply where needed. So we're going to look at chapter 5 first. Solomon gives some counsel about entering the presence of God. And so open to Ecclesiastes 5, and we're going to read verses 1 through 7. Solomon says, guard your steps when you go to the house of God. He would be speaking of the temple, not a church building like we know of, but the temple. Guard your steps when you go to the house of God. To draw near to listen is better than to offer the sacrifice of fools. For they do not know what they are... My page is messing up here. For they do not know that they are doing evil. Be not rash with your mouth, nor let your heart be hasty to utter a word before God. For God is in heaven, and you are on the earth. Therefore let your words be few, for a dream comes with much busyness, and a fool's voice with many words. When you vow a vow to God, do not delay paying it, for he has no pleasure in fools. Pay what you vow. It is better that you should not vow than that you should vow and not pay. Let not your mouth lead you into sin, and do not say before the messenger that it was a mistake. Why should God be angry at your voice and destroy the work of your hands? For when dreams increase and words grow many, there is vanity, but God is the one you must fear. Now, granted, there are some difficult words here and some phrases that is all throughout the book of Ecclesiastes. But scholars have noticed that there are 2 parallel sections here in these first 7 verses. Both contain a positive statement, both contain a negative statement. They each contain a proverb, and then Solomon wraps it up, I guess we could say, with a conclusion. First, the positive statement in verse 1 is telling us to humbly draw near to God with the intention of listening and obeying. It's better than the sacrifice of fools. The negative statement, he says, so don't be quick to speak in God's presence because he's in heaven and you are on the earth. And then he gives a proverb in verse 3, for a dream comes with much busyness and a fool's voice with many words. A little difficult to understand, but the New Living Translation words it this way: just as being too busy gives you nightmares, so being a fool makes you a blabbermouth. It seems to be the idea of what is being said there by Solomon. And then we get to verse 4, the second positive statement. If you make a vow or a promise to God, keep it. And the negative of that is keep it, so don't make a vow that you're not going to keep, because God will be angry with you if you make a promise and don't follow through on that. The proverb, verse 7, the first part of that, for when dreams increase and words grow many, there is vanity. Again, the New Living Translation says, dreaming all the time instead of working is foolishness. And then Solomon draws a conclusion to that. Fear God. Fear God. So what is Solomon saying in these first 7 verses? Up to this point, Solomon has talked a lot about worship without talking about worship, without saying those words. He's mentioned several things that men and women, humanity, are guilty of worshiping at times. Things like pleasure, knowledge, power, wealth, personal achievement. If we're not careful, we can worship those things and we can exalt those things above God. But now he addresses this idea of worshiping the true God. And when we worship the true God, our lives seem to fall into place. Here's Solomon's advice. When we enter God's presence, we must do so intentionally and thoughtfully with the intention of listening to Him and obeying Him. Because hastily entering in and out of His presence, and I think this idea of hastily seems to be this idea of just checking the box, just doing, it's a formality. Hastily entering in and out of God's presence will lead to making promises that we don't keep. And unkept promises anger God, so don't be a talker, be a listener and a doer. And that's what James says, right? Listen, don't be just a listener, but be a listener and a doer. That's what worship is about. We're here to praise Him with our words. We're here to lift our hearts up to Him. But if all we do is talk, and we don't listen, and we don't leave here willing to put what we've heard into practice, all we're doing is making a promise that we have no real intention of keeping. All we've done is just it's been a formality, and we've checked the box. And we've come here and just offered worship, just offered words, but we've not taken in His word and then put it into practice. In a sense, we're making a promise, a vow that we don't intend to keep. And then the fear of God is not just an Old Testament concept. The New Testament says this. The Hebrew writer said, let us be grateful for receiving a kingdom that cannot be shaken, and thus let us offer to God acceptable worship with reverence and awe, for our God is a consuming fire. If our worship is flippant and we approach God with empty sacrifices and empty promises, the Hebrew writer goes on in verse 31 of chapter 10, it's a fearful thing to fall into the hands of the living God. He's talking about fearing God, be in awe of Him, pay attention, take seriously what you do. When we come into the house of God, and although the house of God is different now than the temple, wherever God's people are present or assembling for worship, that's the temple of God, because we are the temple. We need to take seriously what we're doing. We offer Him the fruit of our lips, Hebrews 13, the sacrifice of praise. We worship Him with our words. But if that's all we do, if we don't consume His word and then go put it into practice, we're making promises we don't intend to keep, and that angers God. And so we need to take our worship very seriously. And so Solomon continues with now a warning about worship, or the vanity of riches in chapter 5, verse 8 through 15, really through the end of chapter 6. But we're going to look through the end of part of chapter 5. But first, Solomon brings up again this topic of oppression. It seems a little bit out of place. He's already talked about it. But let's look at verses 8 and 9. He said, if you see in a province the oppression of the poor and the violation of justice and righteousness, do not be amazed at the matter, for the high official is watched by a higher, and there are yet higher ones over them. But this is gained for a land in every way, a king committed to cultivated fields. He's already observed this idea, or made mention of oppression in chapter 3 and then chapter 4. And he says, when you see this injustice or this oppression, don't be amazed by this issue of oppression or economic injustice. He says, it's simply the way the world operates. It's the way the world works. The world doesn't look to God. The world looks at self and how to preserve self. And so he says the high official is The one that's oppressing you, we put it this way, the one that's oppressing you has someone over him, probably oppressing him to some degree. And then one higher than him, and then higher than him. And they're all equally corrupt. They're all using one another to some degree, probably to make a profit in some way. But the irony is found that they all depend on each other, and ultimately the little guy cultivating the field. Each oppressor is being oppressed, and probably some way making a profit, if not money, off of that. And now Solomon gets into the vanity of riches and wealth. Remember, as we go through these verses, we're listening to the words of the man who was the richest man during his time, if maybe not ever in the world. And so he's sharing wisdom from his experience, things that he has noticed, maybe things that he struggled with himself. And so we're not listening to someone who's just maybe supposing or just kind of like, if I've given thought to this is probably the case. We're listening to somebody who's lived through this and has experienced this, and we do well to listen to what he has to say. Let's look at verse 10. Solomon says, "He who loves money will not be satisfied with money, nor he who loves wealth with his income. This is also vanity." And so what Solomon tells us is riches never satisfy. Those who love money will never be satisfied with what they have or with what they make. If you could ask them what would be enough, they may say something like, just a little bit more, right? Or this amount. And if they got to that amount, they would never be satisfied with that as well, because they love riches, they love money more than anything else. They always want more. Paul says the love of money is the root of all evil. And for that reason, riches never satisfy. The appetite for wealth is insatiable. Those that love money, there'll never be a time that they're like, I'm exactly where I need to be, exactly where I want to be. There's always more that they want. So riches never satisfy. Look at verse 11. When goods increase, they increase who eat them. And what advantage has their owner but to see them with his eyes? And we talk about riches, they attract a crowd, don't they? When goods increase, they increase who eat them. There's been documentaries done on people who have won the lottery. And interviews, I think you can find the same thing. And there's a lot of similarities in people who have won the lottery, after they won the lottery, the similarities. But one of the things that I find interesting is they all say something along these lines. After I won the lottery, all of a sudden, everybody wanted to be my friend. Right? Everybody wanted to be my friend. Everyone all of a sudden had a favor to ask of me, something that they needed. Riches invite unneeded attention. And that's what Solomon says. The more we have, the more people want from us, the more people expect from us. And so he says, riches attract a crowd. Let's keep reading, verse 12. Sweet is the sleep of a laborer, whether he eats little or much, but the full stomach of the rich will not let him sleep. Riches don't bring peace. The full stomach of the rich man will not let him sleep. According to the words of Solomon, some believe that the rich man, because of his wealth, and allows him to be lazy to some degree, and he's not like the laborer who works all day, gets home, and he's tired and ready to eat and go to bed, and sleeps well. And so they say that the riches here allow the rich man to be lazy, so he doesn't work hard, and so he can't sleep very well at night. Others think the rich man's insomnia is due to worry and anxiety at the loss of his riches. If riches never satisfy, and that desire for more will never be satisfied, then there's always the worry that what will happen? They'll be lost. You'll lose them. Either way, this wealthy king says his riches keep him up at night. To some degree, in some way, they impede peace. Look at verses 13 and 17. There's a grievous evil that I've seen under the sun. Riches were kept by their owner to his hurt, And then verse 17, moreover, all his days he eats in darkness, in much vexation, and sickness and anger. Verses 13 and 17 tell us riches invite hurt and suffering. Whether this is speaking to a physical hurt or suffering or a spiritual hurt and suffering, it's hard to say, but an unhealthy view of riches can cause hurt and suffering, especially spiritually. When riches are hoarded, it's done to the detriment of the wealthy and even many times to the detriment of others. Paul instructs the rich to be rich into good works and to be generous with what they have, ready to share what they have with others, be a blessing to others. When we think about what we have, the Bible tells us that we're just stewards of what God has given us, and we're to use those things, our money, our wealth, possessions, in such a way that we're a blessing to others and not to our own hurt. And so the rich man, Solomon says, riches invite hurt and suffering. Look at verse 14. And those riches were lost in a bad venture, and he is father of a son, but has nothing in his hand. Riches are easily lost. Here today, gone tomorrow. Just as easy as the money showed up in my bank account, it can disappear. Solomon says they can be easily lost. We can be robbed, we can be conned, we can lose them in a bad business investment. Our house, we can come home tonight and our house could burn down and lose all kinds of things that are precious to us. We could lose them through maybe some kind of a frivolous lawsuit that somebody attacks us and wants everything that we have, and we can lose our wealth. It's Jesus that tells us that moth and rust destroy and thieves break in and steal. Riches are easily lost. Just as quickly as I gain them, I can lose them. Verse 15. As he came from his mother's womb, he shall go again, naked as he came, and shall take nothing for his toil that he may carry away in his hand. You can't take your riches with you. You can't take them with you. It doesn't matter if your assets are $10 billion or $10. When you die, they go to somebody else. You can't take them with you. They do nothing for you in the afterlife. Now, how you use them in the present life, you may have everything to do in the afterlife. But they won't benefit you in the afterlife because you can't take them with you. Solomon has already told us everything that you have when you die goes to someone else. And that person may use it wisely. That person may be a fool and lose it quickly. This truth is echoed by what Job said in Job 1 and verse 21. Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked shall I return. I didn't come into the world with anything, and I'm not going to leave with anything, or I can't take anything with me. Paul says almost the exact same thing in 1 Timothy 6 and verse 7. We brought nothing into the world, and we can't take anything out of the world. It's interesting to me the emphasis that is placed on wealth and riches. And sometimes I'm just as guilty as anybody else. And I understand the reasons why, because we need money, right? I need money in my bank account. There's people that need it every month. I've got a mortgage. I got people in my house that want to eat food. You know, they want the lights on. I have people in my house that want to be cool and comfortable during the summer and warm during the winter. You need those things, right? So I've got to have money, but the emphasis that is placed on it can be very unhealthy. It can be a benefit here, but it's all about my view towards those things and how I use them, because I can't take them with me. And then in chapter 5, verse 18 through the end of chapter 6, it seems that Solomon gives some words of reflection on these things, these principles that he's laid out for us. First one, let's read verses 18 through 20. Behold, what I have seen to be good and fitting is to eat and drink and find enjoyment in all the toil with which one toils under the sun the few days of his life that God has given him. for this is his lot. Solomon has already noticed this in previous chapters. Everyone also to whom God has given wealth and possessions and power to enjoy them and to accept his lot and rejoice in his toil, this is the gift of God. I think we'll stop there. Or we'll read one more. We'll just go through 20. For he will not much remember the days of his life, because God keeps him occupied with joy in his heart. One of the reflections I think Solomon makes is, if God doesn't matter to you, the only thing that you can do with your riches under the sun is enjoy them while you have them. And even that, he says, is a small gift from God. I mean, what we have can so easily, as we've already made known, so easily and so quickly be taken away from us. Solomon says, enjoy what you have while you have. Be content with that. If all you're doing is consumed with gaining more, you're not going to enjoy what you have. You're not going to be thankful for what you have. Make the best, as he's kind of mentioned before, make the best of a bad situation. If God doesn't matter to you, the only thing that you can do with what you have is just spend some time enjoying it while you have it. And he says this itself is a small gift from God. Let's read chapter 6, verses 1 through 6. He says, there's an evil that I have seen under the sun, and it lies heavy on mankind. A man to whom God gives wealth, possessions, and honor, so that he lacks nothing of all that he desires, yet God does not give him power to enjoy them, but a stranger enjoys them. This is vanity. It is a grievous evil. If a man fathers 100 children and lives many years, so that the days of his life, of his years are many, but his soul is not satisfied with life's good things, he also has no burial. I say that a stillborn child is better off than he. For it comes in vanity and goes in darkness its name is covered. Moreover, it has not seen the sun or known anything, yet it finds rest rather than he. Even though he should live 1,000 years twice over, yet enjoy no good, do not all go to the one place. I think what Solomon's saying is here, but understand this, no amount of riches can make up for a life without joy. If God doesn't matter to you, the only thing you can do with what you have is try to take time to enjoy it. But understand, no amount of riches is going to bring true joy into your life. It can't make up for a life without joy. Riches can give some momentary joy. I mean, the Hebrew writer even acknowledges that sin is pleasurable for a short time. And even the wealth or the accumulation of goods or the things that I have, they can bring momentary joy, but they will never bring lasting joy. Even a long life with abundance of things does not ensure a life of joy. It doesn't mean life is going to be great for you. It's all about the perspective. If I live a life disconnected from eternity, not thinking about God, not taking God into account for the choices that I make and the way that I live my life, no amount of riches is going to make up for a life without joy or bring lasting joy. True lasting joy is only found in God. I think we can go back to the first part of chapter 5. Listening to God and obeying God. I think I'm being amened back here. This is wonderful. Next, verses 7 through 9. All the toil of man is for his mouth, yet his appetite is not satisfied. For what advantage has the wise man over the fool? And what does the poor man have who knows how to conduct himself before the living? Better is the sight of the eyes than the wandering of the appetite. This also is vanity and a striving after the wind. No amount of riches can make up for a life without joy, because riches, as we made note a while ago, cannot satisfy the soul. They may scratch the itch for a little while, They may provide a little bit of joy. They may provide something for me or allow me to have something that I wouldn't have been able to have otherwise. I'm not saying there's not any benefit to it or any good that may come of it. But Solomon describes it as a wandering appetite that can't be satisfied. Riches can fill your stomach, but when you wake up in the morning, guess what? You're going to be hungry again, right? At lunchtime, you're going to be hungry again. And then there's second lunch sometimes. And then the first dinner and second dinner for some of you. But the idea is you can fill your stomach all you want, but at some point, you're going to be hungry again. They can fill our stomach, riches can fill our bank accounts, but they can never fill our soul. They may give the appearance, they may give the facade of joy and satisfaction, but it'll never fill our soul. Let's finish the chapter. 10 through 12. Whatever has come to be has already been named, and it is known what man is, and that he is not able to dispute with one stronger than he. The more words, the more vanity, and what is the advantage to man? For who knows what is good for man while he lives the few days of his vain life, which passes like a shadow? For who can tell man what will be after him under the sun? If God doesn't matter to you, the only thing that you can do with your riches under the sun is enjoy them while you have them. But understand, no amount of riches, you can't accumulate enough to make up for a life without joy, and that's because riches can never satisfy. Therefore, riches cannot change the vanity of life without God. Verse 10 has some strong allusions all the way back to Genesis chapters 1, 2, and 3. The naming of the animals, man being made from the earth and not listening to God. In the garden, man discovered his own mortality and his weakness before God. What's been done can't be changed. It can't be undone, no matter how much money anybody has. And Solomon asked two rhetorical questions. Who knows what's good for man? And then number two, who can tell man what will be after him? Nobody but God. Nobody but God. Only God can cause real, effectual change in the life of people. Riches can't change the vanity of life. Riches can't change how empty life feels sometimes. Although you can fill yourself up and your bank account up, you can fill your garage up so much more that you need another garage or a storage unit to fill up. You can keep doing that. But it doesn't cause real effectual change. You'll never be satisfied. Only God can do that. Only God can cause real change in our lives. There's nothing new under the sun. But we live in a very real way above the sun. Look at Colossians chapter 3. Paul says, if then you have been raised with Christ, seek the things that are above, where Christ is, seated at the right hand of God. Set your minds on the things that are above, not on things that are on the earth. For you have died, and your life is hidden with Christ in God. And when Christ, who is your life, appears, then you will also appear with Him in glory. Paul says, don't set your mind on things here. Where Jesus would say, where moth and rust destroy, where thieves break in and steal, lay treasures up in heaven, above the sun. Set your mind on things above, where Jesus is, seated at the right hand of God. We're told in Ephesians chapter 2 that as Christians we've been seated with Him, with Jesus, in the heavenly places. Our lives are lived here, but our minds and our thoughts and everything we look forward to is up there with Him. And every decision that we make is based on that. At least it ought to be. The things that we say, the things that we do, ought to take God into account, because you're here tonight because He's important to you. And not just important to you, He's everything to you. Don't set your mind on the world's riches when God has already given you everything that heaven has to offer through Jesus Christ. Nowhere in the Bible does God reveal that it's sinful to be wealthy or have nice things. The Bible doesn't teach that. But the Bible does tell us not to trust in them. Not to trust in them. Paul says, as for the rich in this present age, which when I think about that, would include all of us. It'd include all of us. As for the rich in this present age, charge them not to be haughty, nor set their hopes on the uncertainty of riches, but on God who richly provides us with everything to be enjoyed. And as it pertains to riches and wealth, material possessions, let's listen to the words of Jesus, and the lesson will be yours. He says, take care and be on guard. Pay attention. Be vigilant in this. Make sure that this is a priority in your life, that you are constantly watching against all covetousness. For one's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions. So many people measure their life by what they have or what they don't have. And their life is either good or terrible because of that. And it leads to so many unhealthy things and ultimately spiritual death. And so Jesus warns us. He says, pay attention, be careful, be on guard, because your life does not consist on the abundance of your possessions. Because in Jesus Christ, God has given us everything. Everything. As I said earlier, I don't think of myself this way, but all of us are rich. We have more money than most people in the world will ever have in their whole entire lives. We live very comfortable lives, extremely comfortable lives. And it's so easy to become set in that and expect certain things and not think about other things because of what I have. My life is easy and comfortable. That's exactly what Jesus is saying. Be careful about that. Don't let those things take the place of Him, because they'll destroy you spiritually. Let's listen to the words of Solomon and take his advice. Let's focus on Jesus. Tonight, if you need to respond to the Lord's invitation, we give you that opportunity. If you're ready to put your faith in Jesus through obedience to the gospel, you can do that tonight by repenting of your sins.